morning. Welcome to the AFF Facebook live chat today, which is all about the new allocations and repairs maintenance contract known as FDIS. Just going to wait and see if we can get some people up. No viewers at the moment. Right. We're just going to wait a few minutes and wait for some people to hopefully jump on and join us. We've got lots of people on, 31 viewers, fantastic stuff. So good morning, welcome to the AFF Facebook live chat, which today is all about the new allocations and repairs and maintenance contract known as FDIS. This is going to be replacing the current National Housing Prime contract run by Amy, and it's going to be happening later this year. AFF is hosting this event on behalf of the 3 services, so welcome to any Naval and RAF families who are joining us as well. So make sure you've got a coffee or a tea and a biscuit. James and I are here. We've got our Costas from downstairs because we like a frothy coffee. Text your friends the links to remind them it's on and settle in for the next hour or so to hear about FDIS, to hear about what FDIS is, the differences you'll see in your day-to-day dealings with the new suppliers, and ask any questions you want on the subject. Hopefully we can answer them today, but if not, we will be taking all questions away and developing a Mythbuster, which we'll put up on the FanFed websites, and you'll be able to read in slow time. I'd also suggest that in time you look at the information about FDIS on the gov.uk website and the Pinnacle website, and this will be updated regularly, but a few more details about that later on. What we won't be able to do today is answer any specific questions or issues concerning the current contract. If you do have any issues, please make sure that you call in at your repairs, log any official complaints that you may have via the Amy Help Desk as usual, and if you're still having any issues, contact your relevant families federation. Now, just as a warning here, we are in Andover Central Office for AFF. The internet, it's an army situation, is notoriously quite bad, so if we do drop off, bear with us, we'll jump back on as soon as we can. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kat Calder. I'm the AFF housing specialist, and I have been for the last 10 years now. And for the 17 years that my husband was in the army, I had 13 different homes. So I have well and truly been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and seen the good, the bad and the ugly sides of military housing. And with me today to help answer your questions and your concerns is Air Commodore James Savage, the head of DIO Regional Delivery Accommodation. So over the course of his career, James and his family have lived in SFA for nearly 14 years. So he's also had the experience and is well versed in the issues and the concerns that you as serving families can experience with housing. So first things first, James will give a brief outline of FDIS, the changes to the new contract, which you will all hopefully see as beneficial, and a short introduction to the new suppliers, and then we'll open the floor for you to ask questions. So get thinking while James is talking, listen to what he's saying, and then get typing, and we'll get back to your questions later on. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Kat, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to so many of you today about the new contracts that will come in later this year. I look forward to answering as many of your questions as we can in the time available. First, I'll start with an overview of what FDIS is and what changes the new contracts are designed to bring. In doing so, I'll try and pick up on as many as possible of the common themes that came from the pre-submitted questions. FDIS stands for the Future Defence Infrastructure Services Programme. The accommodation element will replace the current National Housing Prime contract we have with Amy, with 5 new contracts. First, there will be a National Accommodation Management Services contract. You'll hear this referred to as the NAMS contract. That will provide a single national service centre that you will use to access housing services, and it will also provide local housing officers who will supervise move-ins and move-outs and the management of individual patches. Then there will be 4 regional accommodation maintenance services contracts that will maintain homes and the community spaces around them. You'll hear these referred to as the RAMS contracts. The national contract, or the NAMS contract, has been awarded to Pinnacle, who are specialists in providing housing services to customers ranging from social housing to luxury flats. This is the first time the MOD has employed a housing specialist to deliver services to SFA. The maintenance contracts covering the South East and South West regions have been awarded to Vivo, which is a joint venture between Serco and Engie. Engie will bring extensive expertise in the production and supply of low-carbon energy and services. The maintenance contracts covering the North and Central regions have been awarded to Amy. Although 2 of the regions have gone to Amy, I should stress that the new contracts are designed to be very different from the current one. DIO worked very closely with all three families federations to identify and address the lessons learned from the current contract in order to design a service that's suitable to meet the needs of service families. Pinnacle, Amy and Vivo have all committed through their bids to delivering significant change, and they will each bring and share different skills, perspectives and experiences in delivering the future contracts. The new contracts are due to go live on the 1st of March this year, but we are currently reviewing that date, particularly in light of the ongoing COVID situation, to ensure all the key systems and processes will be tested and proven before we go live. I don't want to repeat the experience at the start of the current contract where performance dropped very significantly when the new contract went live. If there is a change to that in-service date, we will publicise that through the Families Federation websites. So, how will the new contracts be different? I don't have time this morning to list all of the changes, but I'll highlight several key areas. Not all of these will come on the day the contracts go live, and I'll signpost where that will be the case. Of course, any contract transition is challenging, and our first principle will be to focus on getting the basics right, particularly around response maintenance and anything to do with safety, before we progressively roll out new capabilities. With that caveat, here are some of the key changes FDIS is designed to bring. First, it will introduce estate agent style information on all properties available for allocation. It will take some time to build the full library of over 48,000 homes that we manage, but the end result should be much better information to help you select your preferred home. It will also provide greater flexibility in the way you can access services through the National Service Centre. A new Home Hub app will be introduced to complement existing phone and online means of contacting the centre. This will allow you to raise service requests from your smartphone, tablet or personal computer. You'll also be able to use the Home Hub to select your own appointment time for routine appointments if you wish. We expect the Home Hub to be introduced shortly after cutover, and this is standard practice for a change of this nature, so that we can make sure that the new service comes in and is stable using the existing means of contact before we then roll out self-help options subsequently. There will also be a much greater focus on ensuring properties are properly prepared for move-in. The responsibility for preparing properties will rest with the Morans contractors, Vivo or Amy as appropriate. But from day one, there will be independent checks by Pinnacle housing officers 2 days before move-in to ensure that homes fully meet the agreed move-in standard, including cleanliness. FDIS will also extend the role of the housing officer to provide them with greater ownership of their housing patches to improve their management. By enhancing the appearance of each patch, your lived experience should be improved. This change in responsibility will happen from day one, but it will of course take some time for the housing officers to make changes on the ground. FDIS will also introduce 2-hour appointment windows, plus evening and weekend appointments. On the day of the appointment, the window will be narrowed down to 1 hour, and you will be given the contact telephone number of the engineer that will respond to your call. FDIS will also give you the ability to track appointments online, including through a track by engineer capability that will show you in real time where the engineer is, so that you know when to expect them to arrive at your home. This will all come in from day one. FDIS will also simplify repair categories from 5 to 3 and reduce most target times, again from day one. Importantly, under FDIS, suppliers will be incentivised to complete reactive maintenance sooner than the deadline, and we might explore that later in the call. Under FDIS, there is also a requirement to fix at least 85% of issues on the first visit, encouraging our supply partners to improve fault diagnosis, keep more spares in their vehicles, and ensure the right engineer is allocated to complete the repair. Suppliers will be paid on a price per home basis rather than a price per visit, again from day one. This is a proven approach in the wider housing sector and incentivises contractors to undertake simple preventive maintenance, as well as asking on each visit if there are other things they can fix while they are there. This will be coupled with enhanced maintenance schedules based on recognised industry standards. This should all reduce the number of reactive failures and minimise disruption for you as families in the longer term. FDIS will also improve the process for additional needs and disability adaptations. One of the pre-submitted questions asked if FDIS will employ independent occupational therapists, and I'm afraid it won't in that respect. Occupational therapy support will still have to come from the local health authority. but FDIS will set a target of approving works within 15 days from the date of application, so that very early on families should get confidence in what will be delivered for them and what the approach will be taken to do the works. Pinnacle will be responsible for providing weekly updates from that point to families on progress of the works, and each family will be provided with a dedicated focal point that they can liaise with over their needs and over the works as they progress. FDIS will also introduce more robust targets and incentives. These will include specific targets for both delivery performance and customer satisfaction. If the suppliers fall below minimum standards, there will be financial consequences, but there will also be financial incentives for them to exceed the minimum contracted standard. This is a very different approach from the current contract, where customer satisfaction has no impact on what AMI are paid. There are very few financial levers I can pull if performance falls below the contracted standard, and there is no reward if AMI exceed the minimum standard. As FDIS involves significant change, the new suppliers will be allowed 6 months to embed the service before those targets start to bite. Finally, our suppliers will fund compensation when at fault, for example when missing an appointment or failing to get a home ready for move-in instead of DIO. This should again incentivise them to deliver to a satisfactory level and will apply from day one. Several of the pre-submitted questions asked how the cut-over to the new contracts will work for homes awaiting new kitchens or bathrooms, and if modifications approved by AMI, such as self-help decorations, would be honoured by the new contractors. All of the plans for upgrades and approvals for self-help modifications will be passed from the current to the new contracts and will be honoured. So far I've focused on the changes that FDIS is designed to bring, but it's important to point out that the new contracts won't change everything. Things like the amount of funding for insulating or improving homes, the definition of the Decent Homes and Decent Homes Plus standards, and the entitlement criteria for SFA are all determined independently of the contracts. This doesn't mean that nothing is being done to make improvements in these areas, and we'll provide further details in the Mythbuster document after this event. Of course, the new suppliers will have to work to MOD policy just as AMI have to today. But I'm keen that we use the change in contracts to drive a change in the culture in the delivery of housing services, focusing much more on the needs of families than on process and policy. This must be at the heart of improving customer satisfaction. The very first thing I stressed to the Pinnacle, AMI and Vivo teams when the contracts were awarded was the extent to which individual accommodation issues need to be viewed in the broader context of the wider challenges that you as service families face, including frequent separations, the worry when your partners are deployed on operations and in harm's way, and the impact of frequent moves on children's education, spousal careers, and access to things like NHS dentists and childcare. Our language has traditionally focused on properties, assets, and occupants, rather than homes, community spaces, and families. This can lead to a lack of empathy, a failure to put families at the heart of what we do, and the dreaded phrase, "it's fit for purpose" to describe things that should not be considered suitable for a high-quality modern home. Therefore, I've agreed with Pinnacle, AMI and Vivo that we must all make clear to our teams that our job is to provide homes for families, not simply properties for occupants, all to a standard that befits the many sacrifices you will make on behalf of the nation. To that end, we'll be introducing new customer service training for Pinnacle, AMI, Vivo and my team that will bring to life what it means to be a service family through video interviews with families from all three services. Additionally, all of our teams will be encouraged to consider if policy or process is getting in the way of doing the right thing for families. They may not be able to fix that immediately, but they'll be encouraged to flag that up to the chain of command to see if we can do something to improve that. Finally, I should offer a bit of a reality check. I deliberately talk about what the contracts are designed to achieve, but they are just words on paper. We've worked hard to place robust contracts, but the acid test will be how we collectively bring them to life, and they will not transform your experiences overnight. Some of the changes FDIS is designed to bring will take some time to deliver or to take effect, and anyone who has experience in changing culture will know that's never a quick fix. However, the intent is to build the principle of continuous improvement into future plans so that the contract will evolve to exploit new technology and emerging housing industry good practice and will adopt lessons from its early implementation. This again is very different from the current contract, which was not designed to evolve in that way. For these reasons, I really do believe that these new contracts present a big opportunity to address many of the issues that you currently have to deal with as families and to improve the service that we give you. We'll talk at the end about how you'll be able to find out more about what's to come, but I'll now hand back to Kat so that we can start taking some individual questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. That was a really comprehensive overview, so thank you very much for that. And it sounds as if there will be some exciting innovations and key changes, and I hope that this is what you're hearing as well. Just a reminder, if anyone's joined, we're having a Facebook Live here with James Savage, who is the head of DIO accommodation, and we're talking about the FDIS contract. If you've missed any of this, we will be able to rewind, or you'll be able to watch this back later on. So don't worry if you've missed any of James's introduction, you'll be able to get all of that. So we had several questions pre-submitted by families, so thank you for everyone that did that for us. These mainly focus around the move-in standard, response maintenance and first-time fix. So James, you mentioned the move-in standard just now. Could you elaborate on how this is going to be strengthened and what families can expect? For example, will there be a 14-day report? We've had another question come through from Laura, which ties into this, asking about satisfactory. Satisfactory is maybe a personal decision about what is satisfactory, and she's asking, will there be a definition so that we remove that difference of opinion? So,
sure.
Over to you.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, some really good questions in there. Our improvement to the move-in standard comes in several ways. So the first thing that we're doing is introducing a video guide that brings to life what that standard should look like. At the moment, the move-in guide is words on a page, and that's much more open to interpretation, indeed, as the question implied there, where it says satisfactory. I've seen, for example, homes where the move-in guide says that curtains must be fitted to all windows, but those curtains have been different lengths, not matching, and sometimes not even covering the entirety of the window. That should not be open to that level of interpretation, and that goes back to my earlier point that we're preparing homes for families, not simply a piece of infrastructure. So the video guide will bring to life the words on a page, and therefore be able to be used by everyone involved in the process, not only the contractors but also service families, to look at what to expect and to compare what they see within a home with what that looks like. So one of the things that we will do with that, as well as build it into the training for the operatives, will be to make that video guide available online to you as families, so that you can view that before you move into a home and have it available to you during the move-in as appropriate, so that you can compare what you're seeing with that standard. Then the process will work very much with the 14-day report as today, but that 14-day report you'll be able to upload to the Home Hub app together with any photographs of any defects. So again, a personal experience moving into my last quarter, the garden had got very heavily overgrown. There had been some cutting of the grass, but the grass had not been removed. And indeed it wasn't to the length that we expected it to be. So we would have been able to take photographs of that and upload those photographs onto the Home Hub app as well, and then immediately download all of that information at move out if there were any issues over the standard that we prepared the home into, or questions over whether defects were present when we moved in. So I think again that should be a big innovation for families. I mentioned in my introduction the pre-move-in checks that the Pinnacle housing officers will do on an independent basis now from the RAMS contractor, who will maintain, or who will prepare the homes for move-in. And again, that's a really important part of the process. But there'll also be a follow-up visit a short while after move-in, within the first couple of weeks, from the housing officer to check on families, see how they're doing, and if there are any issues that remain to be resolved at that point as well. So hopefully that brings across that there should be a number of significant improvements in the standard there, and very much a clearer statement available for everyone involved as to what the standard that people should expect when they're moving into their new home.
Great. Well, that all sounds that sounds very, very hopeful. I'm delighted that those changes are coming through. So response maintenance is a recurring issue that comes to AFF. Families have been asking several questions, so I'll break it up. But basically, what are the categories and the timelines for the repairs in the new contract?
Sure. So under the new contract, there'll be 3 categories of response maintenance: emergency, urgent and routine. The timescales will work in a different way from the current contract. So the current contract sets a response deadline, and for emergencies 100% of tasks should be responded to within that 3-hour deadline, and then 95% within the deadlines for the other categories. In the new contract, it will work slightly differently in that the response deadline will be an average. So the maintenance contractors will have to respond to emergencies within 2 hours instead of 3 hours under the current contract, to urgent works on average within 48 hours, but with a target standard of 24 hours. And I'll come back to that difference between the minimum and the target standard in a moment. And then for routine, a minimum standard of 12 days on average, but a target standard of 8 days. The idea behind that is that by setting an average level, it should incentivise the suppliers to respond faster, because of course they keep their average up by responding to as many jobs as quickly as possible. And we've got to recognise that there will be some jobs that are much more complex to fix than others, and so it won't necessarily be possible in all cases to do everything within those timescales. But those timescales are significant improvements on what we've got today. For example, today 95% of routine jobs should be done within 15 days. That will reduce to, as I said, a minimum standard of 12 days and a target standard of 8. And that minimum and target standards play into how the suppliers will be rewarded. So they've got to hit that minimum standard of, say, 12 days for routine, but they will get paid more the closer they get to an average of 8 days for routine. And similarly, they'll get paid more the closer they get to an average of 24 hours for urgent jobs. Just to illustrate what those categories mean, emergency jobs are basically anything that could pose an immediate threat to life or safety, or could result in severe damage to the home, or severe environmental impact, something like a significant leak from an oil tank, for example. So a gas leak, a carbon monoxide alarm sounding or something like that would fall into that emergency category. Urgent are problems that would significantly impact on the ability of the family to live satisfactorily in the home. So that would include things like heating failures during the winter months, running from October to May, or at any time of year if there are vulnerable people, young children, elderly people, or whatever in the home, but also things like cooker failures as well. So anything that makes the home significantly problematic to live in, plus things that could, if they're allowed to persist, cause damage to the home. So not something catastrophic, that would be an emergency response, but a leak that could cause significant damage to the home if it's allowed to persist. And then routine is everything that's not covered by the emergency or the urgent categories.
No, that's fantastic. So moving on from that, how will the contract ensure that the correct workman is sent and turns up? And what will happen if the repair isn't up to standard? And we've got a question here from Bobby as well. Response deadline is not necessarily them actually fixing. So how do we tie in them, the fact that they've turned up and actually fixed it, rather than just turning up to achieve a KPI?
Sure. I'll tackle that first, and forgive me, I should have made that clear. For emergency works, the deadline is to make safe. But for urgent and routine works, the deadline is to fix the problem. So it's not simply to respond. On average, for urgent works, for example, the problem must be fixed within 48 hours and ideally fixed within 24 hours. So that's a fix rather than simply a response. And that very much plays into the first time fix. Immediately that becomes an incentive to fix first time anyway. But I mentioned the 85% target, first time fix target that will be on the contractors. And that's the minimum standard. Again, the target standard will be 95%. So the closer they get to 95% first time fixes, the more they will get paid. Again, designed to be an incentive to them to do that. Practically, how are they going to do that? Well, Pinnacle are introducing in the National Service Centre a new diagnostic decision tree which basically will take their help desk operatives through a series of structured questions to help them diagnose the nature of the problem, the type of engineer that needs to be deployed to fix it. And also there will be the opportunity for them to ask families to submit photographs using the Home Hub app so that they can improve fault diagnosis as well. I've had an example, many of you I'm sure would have had similar, where we reported a fence panel being blown down in heavy winds, and the first visit that came out was someone to come out to confirm that the fence panel had indeed blown down. Then and only then was a job raised to fix it. Clearly, when you've got to be at home waiting for that first visit and then the follow-up visit, that's not a satisfactory way to proceed. So the opportunity will be there for the National Service Centre to ask you to take a photograph, whether it's to identify the make and model of the boiler or the fault code or whatever, or just generally to show the nature of the problem, so that they can identify then what type of engineer needs to be sent out, and also how many. Is it a one-person job? Is it a two-person job or whatever that needs to be done? And then the incentives, as I said, within the contract are very much designed to reward them for good performance on first-time fix. But the second line of defence to that, over and above that first-time fix standard, is customer satisfaction. And customer satisfaction feedback will also play a significant part in how the suppliers are rewarded. So between 17 and 20% of their variable profit will be down simply to customer satisfaction. If you're not satisfied with the response that you've got from a particular job, or indeed with the nature of the work that's done, then you'll be able to feed that back through the customer satisfaction process, and that will impact on how they are rewarded.
Brilliant. So thanks. Whilst you were on set discussing that, James, Lindsay has asked, you were talking about customer satisfaction there. How is it actually going to be recorded and monitored so that you can use that as a tool?
Yeah. So there will be a variety of ways. Pinnacle are bringing in a system called Rant and Rave. Great name, and there will. I'm sure there'll be a bit of both at certain points. But the Rant and Rave is a platform that will be accessible ultimately through their website and Home Hub application that will allow families to provide that customer feedback. Now, I should say at this stage that it's really important that we recognise good performance as well as highlight poor performance. There will be a separate complaints and compliments process if you want to highlight particular operatives as well. But please do use that feedback where the engineers perform well for you as well, because it's really important that that good performance is rewarded. And I'm sure, particularly for Vivo and Amy, that they will want to see which of their operatives are giving better customer satisfaction levels than others, so that they can intervene and improve the performance of any that are dragging the site down, so to speak. So that Rant and Rave process will be the first, or Rant and Rave application will be the first mechanism. There will then be some telephone interviews as well, complementary to that. Some of you may have been contacted under the current contract to provide that feedback as well, but that will be an alternative means where random families are selected to give their feedback on experiences within the contract as well.
That's great. And am I right in thinking, James, that the customer satisfaction survey will actually be a live system, so that it's not a case of reviewing it at the end of every month? It will be reviewed on a daily basis to see what issues are being flagged up, so that things can be sorted sooner?
There will be that opportunity, yes. So the way that the customer satisfaction data feeds into the way that our suppliers are paid will be on a more structured basis, so there'll be monthly reporting of that. But yes, you're absolutely right, there will be much more real-time feedback available to sort of guide the delivery of the service if you want.
Great. Okay, that's lovely. And the last question that we've had really from the pre-submitted questions is a question on first-time fix. So now that engineers are being incentivised to fix a job on their first visit, isn't it more likely to cause poor workmanship rather than waiting for the parts to get it done properly? Will there be a quality control on the repairs? I know that currently within the current contract there is an issue with if they don't have the part on the van, there is a process that you have to go to request parts. Is that going to be changing within the new contract?
It will, absolutely. So the first thing, just picking up on Kat's point there, is that the engineers will have the ability simply to go to someone like Screwfix and pick up parts. So rather than it being a much more bureaucratic process through a structured supply chain, if they need to go and get something quickly and they can do that, then in order to fix the problem there and then they'll have the ability to do that. But in terms of the quality of the work, it's a really important question. Again, an example from my own experience: in our last quarter we had a boiler fault that recurred, and although each time the boiler was brought back into operation when the engineer came out, it took several hours for that to happen. So we were without heating for a significant period of time. But the problem was that the underlying cause of the fault wasn't rectified, and so that ends up with repeat visits. There will be a process within the system that will identify if a problem recurs. So in our case, if the boiler failed for the same reason within a defined period of time after that job was done, then that would not count as a first-time fix, because the underlying cause of the problem hadn't been fixed, even though the boiler had been restored to working order at that stage. So that will be the first element, and then again the customer satisfaction feedback it will apply too. So if we saw that bodge jobs were being done and the customers were not satisfied with the fix that they've been given, we would expect that to come through in the customer satisfaction feedback as well. So that's the kind of the second line of defence, but the first line of defence is making sure that there are no repeat failures from the same cause once a job has been recorded as completed.
That's great. And we've got several questions and comments coming through about obviously things which have had several visits to be fixed, but because it's fit for purpose, it's not being replaced, it's just kind of being bodged, is the word that's being used quite a lot here. Will the suppliers have the ability to just say, yeah, it's not fit, it's not worth spending time and time repairing, we'll just go out and replace without having to go to DIO for requests for funding?
Absolutely. So again, the price per property rather than price per visit approach that I described is designed to incentivise them to avoid repeat visits. So in that particular example, I can see the question there talking about 7 visits for the same problem with the door. It's absolutely got to be more cost effective for us as DIO, but also for our suppliers, simply to fix the problem properly once, rather than constantly come out and have to make temporary repairs or repairs that are not going to last. So the idea is very much that they will be incentivised to do that. And I come back to the culture as well. The fit for purpose bit. The engineers, the operatives, should be looking at it from the perspective of, is this fit for purpose for a decent home, rather than simply, well, it's working, but it looks horrible, it's allowing drafts through or whatever. So again, that cultural dimension should be coming into it too.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks very much. Well, I know that I've seen quite a few comments and questions popping up as we've been chatting away. Laura, hopefully your questions were answered by James during that brief discussion just now. What else have we had? We've had a few questions about the workers, so the people that families see, so the contractors, the accommodation officers. Will those be changing? There does seem to be a feeling on here that there are some contractors and accommodation officers who maybe could do. I'm getting myself into a can of worms here, opening a can of worms here. It can be seen that some have a poor attitude.
Yep.
Will there be a changeover of workforce with the changeover of the contractors?
So, really good question again. Yes and no is the short answer. So there will be some changes, but not everyone involved with the contracts will change over. The Amy and Vivo are taking different approaches to their engineering teams. Amy, as today, will subcontract significantly for the vast majority of the works that are done. And so they will be refreshing their supply chain, as we call it, with some changes before the contracts go live, but some of their subcontractors will remain the same under the new contracts. Vivo are taking a different approach, and a much bigger proportion of their engineering teams will be employed in-house rather than through subcontracts. There will still be some subcontracts, for example in specialist areas like asbestos management, where it makes more sense for them to reach out to specialists when they need them than to employ them on a permanent basis. But they will have a much greater proportion of their teams directly employed. In both cases, the customer service training that I mentioned earlier will be employed, and so the idea will be that the teams working in people's homes in particular will be exposed to that training in terms of both what standards we're expecting from the contracts, but also what the lived experience of you as service families is, and therefore what they should be alive to when they're working in people's homes. At some of the management levels, again, there will be some people who will 2P across, those of you that know the 2P arrangements, will 2P across from the current contractor Amy into either Pinnacle or Vivo, or indeed will remain with Amy as today. So I do understand the basis of that question. The customer satisfaction feedback that I mentioned before, the way that will work should provide much better information or ability to track how individual people, individual engineers in particular, are performing on a customer satisfaction basis, and so allow more targeted work to help them improve if need be. So whereas today, there's although we have the customer satisfaction surveys, that data is not traced back to the operatives that have turned up to particular homes and the like. Again, an example from my experience in the past, albeit the Modern Housing Solutions contract rather than the current one, but we had in the area where we lived a small number of heating engineers that would turn up to jobs. One of them really stood out and really went the extra mile for us, and we were delighted. I won't name him, but we were delighted when he turned up, because we knew that we would get really good customer service, and that our problem would be fixed there and then, or that we would be given good advice on how to follow up with the NHS call desk to get follow-up work done. Whereas the other heating engineers that turned up would do very much as we've talked about earlier, just restore the heating there and then consider that their job was done and would move on. So that customer satisfaction feedback will allow our suppliers to identify who their stars are and reward them appropriately, but also identify people who, if they're not achieving the same level of customer satisfaction when they visit homes, will be able to take action against them. And similarly for the local housing officers, again, which areas are getting the highest customer satisfaction results, and which are getting poorer performance where they might need to intervene as well.
That's great. So hopefully, Claire, that will have answered your question on Amy doing subcontracting and how their subcontracted workforce will be held to account. So as James said, with the customer satisfaction feedback, that should help with that. And Phil, hopefully that's reassured you that sorry, excuse me, frog in my throat. that the training that everyone will have, whether they're new or existing staff, should, as you say, because I pay a little rent, I have to make do and carry on. Hopefully that will completely be removed from the psyche of anyone that is coming to your home to do a repair or to speak to you about your housing. Obviously, these things take time to embed. We've got a changeover of contract. We have an issue with getting training done, so not everyone will have had all the training by the first day of the contract. These things will happen gradually, but the intent of the contract is that it will happen as quickly as possible. But I think from the start, really, we're trying to make sure that the basics, what you as families really expect, so a clean property at move-in, a repair that is turned up to by the right person with the right tools, who is the right trade, who can do the fix at the first time in the right timeline. Let's get those things sorted first, and then we can start to add on the bells and whistles that really sound as if they are absolutely going to help families going forward. So being able to track your engineer is modern stuff, isn't it? I mean, it's like, I don't expect to not have my Hermes or DHL person ping me an email or a text to say you can track me on this, that, the other. So we're used to that kind of thing with most of our experience with service industries. So it'll be great to see that kind of thing is going to come in. But don't expect it from day one, is all we're saying. It will take a while to bed in, but we're going to get the basics, or DIO and the suppliers are going to get the basics. So where are we? So we have got, so we've had quite a few questions on rent, notice to vacate timelines. So as James said, those aren't related to the contract per se. They are set by, so rent is set by the Armed Forces Pay Review Body, and the notice to vacate time is a policy which is out with James's control and dealt with by MOD policy team. But as James said, there will hopefully be the opportunity, if it is seen that policy is hampering families' abilities to live as they should be able to, that those will be potentially reviewed. Obviously not promising any changes, but the potential will be there for us to request reviews just to make life easier for everybody. What have we got? So, previous SONs. Will previously agreed SONs be processed by the new contractor? We had one agreed in September. I was told in December, after chasing countless time, that all SONs were on hold. So where do we stand with promised works moving forward? So
those SONs will be carried over. We have tasked Amy to deliver some works after the cutover date. So rather than having a stop on everything, there will be some jobs that Amy will complete after the new contracts go live, even in the regions where they're not responsible for delivering the service in the future, so that we do have some degree of a pipeline of work following through. But we're in the process now of transferring the SONs for new works under the new contract across to Vivo and Amy for next year's programme. So they are, Vivo obviously need a bit of time to mobilise, but they're now in a position where their project managers can start work on planning the works that will be transferred into the new contract from the beginning. So you should see things begin to pick up in the next few weeks on that.
That's great. And so also, obviously, if information is now being transferred over, Jenny's asked a question: what happens on March outs with new contracts if we moved in under Amy, not Amen? Will the 14-day reports be carried over? So am I correct in saying that those will all be carried over?
They will, absolutely, yes.
So if you move out under the new contract, having moved in under Amy, 14-day reports should still be present, so that you can refer to that when you've left. However, I would always say, always keep a copy yourself and photos yourself, just in case the system, something happens with anything. It's always, whatever you're doing in life, always have a backup yourself. I'm sorry, I'm not not sure how to pronounce your name there, but it would be nice to have a brief into your new home, so that hopefully that will be addressed on the follow-up visit rather than walk into the unknown. So, from what James has said, there will be more information online for your property. Hopefully we will start to filter through and start to get more floor plans in, actual photographs of internal aspects as and when that's possible to do. Obviously those can only be done when properties are vacant, so we may have generic photos and generic floor plans, which will then hopefully be updated with specific floor plans for that particular property, so you should know a bit more about that. And also the hub, my understanding is that there will be more information on that on the local area, so you know, when do the bins go out, you know, where are the local doctors with the local schools, that kind of thing. So hopefully you will have more information at move-in than you would currently have, and it'll be available in one place as well, rather than having to go, you know, here, there and everywhere to find the different pieces of information.
Would it help if I expand a little bit on that, how the Home Hub will provide that additional
information? Absolutely. I think the Home Hub, a quick update on the Home Hub would be great, because that's a brand new innovation.
So, as I mentioned in the introduction, we will make that go live shortly after the cutover, rather than at a minute past midnight on the first day of the contract, just to de-risk that cutover process. But the Home Hub will then develop in two phases. The first phase will be effectively transactional things like raising a repair request, booking or amending an appointment if you want to book your own rather than simply take the one that's given by the National Service Centre. If you want to request furniture or arrange for furniture to be collected and removed from the property as well. And from go live, it will provide you with that opportunity to upload the 14-day report and associated photographs. The second phase, which we'll deploy a little bit afterwards, will then do three things. It will provide the ability for Pinnacle to give you information specific to your local area, so things like how to register for a GP, what the contact details are and things like that, bin schedules and so on as well, as Kat mentioned. Second, it will provide the facility to give families notifications, whether that's a notification specifically to you, for example, a reminder that your move-in appointment is due in 2 days' time, and a link to the video guide for move-in, so it will make it easy for you to refresh, first to find out where to find that video guide, and then to refresh yourself in terms of what to expect from the move-in as well. But if there are wider announcements, so think back to the very beginning of the pandemic, for example, where we were sending out information about how COVID-safe processes were going to work. If there was a notification that would be relevant to all families, there could be that push notification that says, go and have a look at the brief, providing a link for really important information that all families living in SFA need to be aware of as well. And then that second phase will also include the estate agent style information on properties. So when the Home Hub goes live, it will be transactions first, and then in a second phase, once that's all working satisfactorily, then those three additional bits of local information, push notifications, and the estate agent style information on properties available for allocation.
Brilliant. So, I mean, hopefully that will answer some of the questions that have been pinging up while James has been speaking as well. So, the lost 14-day report, which several of you have been commenting on, the Home Hub means that you will be able to upload yourself to your home file the 14-day report, along with photographs and evidence. So hopefully there will be no more we've lost your 14-day report, or you didn't send it in, or you've tried to update it recently. So hopefully that will answer some of those questions that have been pinging in about that. Green, you asked a question on Anders. There is, if you, I don't know if you've watched all of this, but James did mention this slightly earlier on. There will be some changes to Anders. Other things will remain the same. So if you go back and have a listen, that should be answered there. James, we've had a question on Okay. The walkaway scheme. Will there be a replacement for the walkaway scheme?
No, there won't, is the short answer. I know for some families that might be a disappointment. For others, they've found the walkaway scheme currently to be disappointing. And the view was taken in the development of the new contracts that the walkaway scheme didn't represent good value for money, and that we could spend the money. Although the family pays for the clean under the walkaway scheme at the moment, we weren't seeing value for money for families in that, with the concern that homes were being, or families were paying for homes to be cleaned, but then when the next family moved in, there wasn't evidence of that cleaning necessarily having been done. So the walkaway scheme won't be available under the new contract.
So will families will be able to go back to the old system where we used to have, potentially, serving families could set up their own companies, or do the clean and then be there for a guaranteed move out and things at the end.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Indeed.
Okay, so
that's what my wife and I ended up doing. We used the walkaway scheme initially, but we then found local cleaners who did a really good job, and we're happy to use them.
Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. And we've had a question about IT. The fact that there is another, obviously, because we're going to have the NAM and the RAMS, which currently were with us all one contractor. The NAMs will need to talk to the RAMs. We've been asked, can you guarantee that there will be not be a lapse in communication going forwards?
Okay, so if I take that from an IT perspective and from a sort of human perspective, because some of it will be about press a button and information flow between IT systems, but some of that engagement between the NAMS and RAMS contractor at local level actually will be through dialogue in the old-fashioned way, rather than through press of a button. And the idea is that we should be very strong on both under the new contract. So the first thing is that there's an awful lot of work going into developing both the NAMS and the RAMS IT systems, and then conducting really robust testing of those. I mentioned at the beginning we're reviewing the timescale for the introduction of the new contracts, and one of the key things where I said that we need to make sure that everything is tested and proved is exactly in that IT space, so that the two systems, or in fact three systems, because Pinnacle, Amy and Vivo will each have their own, that the three systems talk effectively together, and that therefore when the Pinnacle National Service Centre receives a call and the operative there, the customer service advisor, tasks Amy or Vivo, send the engineer, that information is flowing properly. And then through a lot of the processes, if I take, for example, the project management process, there's much more structure built into the process around points of communication between the NAMS and the RAMS contractors, so that the local housing officer can be kept abreast of what's going on. And one of the advantages of that NAMS and RAMS separation, albeit it does demand better communication, is that the RAMS contractor will be able to focus on maintenance, the sort of construction and facilities management side, and the NAMS contractor will focus much more on accommodation management and accommodation services. But there will be those points of contact, both online through IT systems, but through structured dialogue and so on, that will make sure that the maintenance contractor is talking to the NAMS housing officer in the local area and vice versa. And indeed, it will be absolutely in both their interests to make sure that there are no surprises on move-in dates, preparation for homes for move-in, and that the project management process is strengthened as well, with a named point of contact for families for projects, so that rather than having simply to go through the National Service Centre or the help desk as today, you will have a named point of contact if there's going to be any major project works on your home as well, that you'll be able to speak to direct. So communication between NAMS and RAMS, but also I think hopefully better communication with the families over some of those major project works as well.
Great, thank you very much, James. Catherine's asked a question. It's not necessarily to do with the contract, but just to answer that quickly, will dependent be allowed to sign for the house and hand back, or will it remain with a proxy? A dependent can sign for a house. That's not a problem. You need to, the serving person will need to sign the form, the proxy form, to say that the dependent is going to do it, but that's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. That's not a problem. We did have a question at the start from John about eco builds, so introduction of solar panels, electric vehicle charging points, increasing insulation in order to reduce the impact of the increasing prices of fuel and things like that, and rainwater catchment somebody else mentioned. So do we have any updates on how we might move forward with eco-friendly developments?
So that's one of those areas where the core contract service itself doesn't change the requirement. So there's a core, under the new contracts, there will be a core service that covers allocations, move-ins, move-outs and response maintenance, as well as statutory and mandatory maintenance. Things like fitting insulation, upgrading rainwater goods to homes and the like will be delivered through the contract, but they're funded separately from the core service. So the extent to which I'm able to invest money in those sorts of eco-friendly upgrades, for example, are not, that's not driven by the terms of the contract itself. The works will be done as I can afford to do them by the contractors, but that funding sits outside the cost of the core contract itself. Many of you will be aware that the MOD budgetary process works on an annual cycle. I'm waiting to hear what my budget will be for next financial year, and that's always the case at this stage of the year. The financial year begins on the 1st of April, and we don't normally find out exactly what our budget is until either just before or just after the start of the financial year. But investing in external wall insulation, for example, and other thermal efficiency measures has been a really high priority of us to date. We know that there are a lot more homes that need to be done, but we've, in the last year, over 3,000 homes have had full external wall insulation and thermal upgrade. That for those families, I think, will have made a big impact, but there's a lot more to do in that space. So the extent to which I can fund that depends on how my funding bid for the next financial year and subsequent years goes, rather than being inherently baked into the terms of the new contracts.
Okay, that's great. So Vanessa, hopefully that's answered your question, but with Engie having a very good basis in eco-friendly, I'm assuming that should we get the funding, we will be able to tap into that quite easily and quite quickly in order to get the most up-to-date
very much so.
Works done.
Yeah, and one of the advantages of having Engie on board, and I should say as well, another one of the new features of the contract is that in all regions there will be full property surveys done on an indicative range of homes. So really going in, doing intrusive surveys and so on of different types of property, different ages of property and so on, so that we can build much better long-term asset management plans for those homes, which will include advice from Engie on what more we can do to improve the sustainability of the housing that we provide as well. So we expect Engie to be helping us identify things that we can do better in that space for the longer term as well, bringing in that expertise from their background. So that's one of the really exciting parts of the new contract, and it's a really important thing for the future, because many of you will be aware of the work, the new legislation that the government has been considering bringing in to raise the minimum energy performance standards for homes, particularly in the rented sector moving forward as well. So we're going to have to invest a lot in that to keep abreast of government legislation. And Engie's expertise in this area, I think, is going to be invaluable to us for identifying innovative things that we can do as well. And forgive me, I forgot to talk about electric vehicle charging points. Again, funded separately from the core contracts, but if you have a desire to have an EVCP fitted to your home at the moment, there is a process that you can follow to apply for that. In some cases, for example, flats, the practicality will be different, and we're having to look at communal charging points for some patches and some homes. But if it's practical to fit an EVCP to your home because you want to invest in an electric vehicle, then there's an application process. It is funding limited if you want. So if we got overwhelmed by applications and the funding for that ran out, then we might have to hold off until additional funding is provided. But at the moment, the funding hasn't run out. So we've had enough funding to meet the demand so far. But again, not part of the core contract, but will be delivered by the contractors. It's being delivered by Amy today, or will be delivered by Amy and Vivo, depending on region in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And there's an article in the Armia News Spring edition on electric vehicle charging points. So if you want to know anything more about that, then read your magazine when it pops through your letterbox. One last question, because we have run out of time. The community has often felt that there was a lack of consultation under the previous contract. How will the new contract address co-design and co-delivery? My understanding is that the new suppliers are going to be much more interactive and will be looking to have family panels which they will be able to speak to and be much more into the community and speaking to the community and listening to the community rather than telling the communities what is going to be done to them. So is that correct, James?
That is correct, and it's a great question and a really important area again. The split, so the current accommodation officer role kind of embraces the role of the pinnacle housing officer in the future, move-ins, move-outs and patch management, plus a lot of work on the maintenance side as well. By splitting the maintenance responsibilities out and giving them to Vivo and Amy, and retaining the move-in, move-out and patch management, the housing officers the Pinnacle provide will have significantly more capacity to talk to their local communities and engage them over what's going to work for them in terms of the services, how to improve the patches and what the local concerns and issues are. Additionally, I've talked about Rant and Rave, the system that Pinnacle are bringing in. They're also adopting another form of software called Crowdicity, which is a crowdsourcing tool that will allow collaborative work on ideas and so on. Now that can be used both at a national level and at a local level, and the idea behind it is that questions can be proposed, challenges raised on that. Families will be invited after the contracts go live to sign up if they want to be one of those families that contribute to it. And then challenges will be raised that might say, for example, at the national level, what could we do to improve, say, the move-in experience compared with what families are experiencing, but also down at the local level, it can be targeted to particular communities. So if we want to run a question on a particular local patch to do with something like on-street parking, if there are problems with parking in a local area or something like that, or availability of garages and the like, then a challenge could be raised on that as well, where families will be invited to contribute ideas and also to comment on ideas that other people have been submitted. So if an idea gets lots of traction and seems popular with that particular community, then that will provide information that will allow the local housing officer to plan what's as appropriate. It'll be a combination of the two. For the national level in particular, we'll rely more on that, but for the local level, there'll be the opportunity for families to contribute, but also more local dialogue rather than just relying on the online systems as well. But again, the FDIS approach should allow that much stronger dialogue with families and much greater opportunity for families to contribute ideas and to comment and rate ideas for improving services as well.
Oh, that's brilliant. So it sounds like the collaboration is obviously a big keyword here for everybody. So I would encourage everyone to sign up for Crowdicity as and when it comes in so that you can have your say. The only way that we can improve things is by speaking to the right people, and if we're being given this tool to do so, then we really need to be able to make the most of it. Obviously, don't stop coming to AFF, because we can pass on all your information as well. But use the correct processes. Right, I'm afraid everybody, that is all we've got time for. So apologies if I've missed any of the last few questions that have come in. Thank you all so much for taking part, taking time out of your day. Hopefully you've got a bit more of an insight into what is coming up in the new contract. If you've missed anything, or we will be taking away all the pre-submitted questions, all the questions that you've asked on the comments. So if you haven't asked anything and you do want it answered, quickly type it in so that we can capture it. We'll be taking all of those away. We'll create a Mythbuster document. We'll put that on all the FAMFED websites, and I believe it's going to be posted on gov.uk as well, in the DIO section. So you'll all be able to look at that. So FAMFEDs, we will all be working very closely with the new suppliers, DIO, and most importantly, you as families, to make sure that the transition to the new contract goes as smoothly as possible over the first few months. So please make sure that you do follow the correct process. If things go wrong, follow the correct process to state that things have gone wrong. But at the same time, please do continue to feed all your feedback to the relevant people, including the FAMFEDs. So, one more thing, very quickly. The information that you really need, I know we all love Facebook, but Facebook doesn't necessarily give you the correct answers when you're asking it to a general community. There will be information on the gov.uk website and on a Pinnacle website, which will be the one-stop shop for all the information that you need. I believe, James, there's going to be a leaflet drop soon to all SFA in the UK, which will give you the information on these websites. They're not up and running yet. As soon as they are, this leaflet drop will take place. Obviously, if you're coming from overseas, keep an eye on the FAMFED websites, your relevant FAMFED website. We will all post all this information up as soon as we get it as well. But for everything else, allocations, applications, repairs and maintenance, follow the same process as you have got at the moment. And thank you very, very much. Hopefully we've answered a lot of your questions. And yeah, have a good day for the rest of it. And hopefully we will have another one of these in the near future. Thanks very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.